Good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. I'm Shivani Gupta. The COVID crisis in India is getting worse by the day, with over 2 lakh new cases now being reported in the last 24 hours to take the national toll to over 1.4 crores. India is the world's second worst hit country with over 1.5 lakh new cases for a fifth straight day. With new cases hitting a fresh high almost every day, India is currently climbing the second wave infections at a much faster rate than the first. The second wave is also much taller than the first wave at the nationwide level. The 7-day average of new cases was 1,33,918 on April 11. This is 1.4 times the weekly average of 93,000 plus cases India hit on September 16 last year at the peak of the first wave. India has also become the second country to report more than 2 lakh daily cases. According to Union Health Ministry data released on Thursday morning, India recorded over 2 lakh cases on April 14. This means that the US took 20 days at the fastest and 28 days at the slowest in moving from 1 lakh daily cases to 2 lakh cases. India has taken just 10 days. Given the situation spiraling out of control in many states, mini lockdowns are coming back. While lockdowns have become a dirty word and literally nobody wants them, are they the only solution? Yanir Bar-Yam, American scientist, professor and a pandemic expert, will be joining us soon to talk about efficient strategies to tackle COVID spread and waves. Many countries have seen third or fourth waves. India is in the second. There is no denying, though, that an early lockdown helped India and is perhaps the only way to keep people indoors. It delayed the peaking of COVID cases till India was ready. It lowered our mortality rate. It avoided a serious fatality graph, unlike countries in Europe and, of course, the USA. India was the slowest also to hit 1 lakh cases, despite being the second most populous country. And India is still registering the lowest deaths per lakh of population. Many studies, in fact, showed that early full lockdown nationwide helped India save many lives apart from becoming more prepared. A joint study by the Ministry of Statistics and the Indian Statistical Institute says around 20 lakh COVID-19 cases and 54,000 deaths were averted due to the national lockdown. Boston Consulting Group's model says India saved between 1.2 to 2.1 lakh lives and averted 36 lakh to 70 lakh cases. The Public Health Foundation of India also said that nearly 78,000 lives were saved because of the lockdown. But remember, India is not the only country that is seeing multiple lockdowns now happening. When there is the second wave, some countries have seen third or fourth waves and they have instituted more lockdowns. Let's look at the example of Australia. Keeping strict COVID restrictions, they eliminated the COVID virus almost completely, at least in individual areas, before opening up. This is something Australia did. They closed their international borders in March last year, but many individual states and territories closed their borders to varying degrees, and some remained closed until late 2020. In addition, remember, the India lockdown was just over 2 months. Many regions in Australia have been in lockdowns for over 4 months. Importantly, many regions were periodically closed during localized outbreaks. That's the most important thing to ensure that the virus does not spread to other safe areas. A second wave of infections emerged in Victoria during May and June, which was attributed to an outbreak at a Melbourne quarantine hotel. The second wave, though largely localized to Melbourne, was much more widespread and deadlier. Victoria underwent a second strict lockdown, which eventually lasted over 4 months. The wave ended with 0 new cases being recorded on October 26. Let's take the case of New Zealand, which has also went for elimination. Of course, it cannot be compared to India in size or population. They have also a zero COVID strategy, though, which is being talked about. They have a near zero infection rate right now. They have a 4-level alert system, and this can be localized. So each region continues to impose restrictions and relaxing them as per cases. There were level 3 restrictions till as late as March 2021 in New Zealand. They have chased the virus, keeping restrictions till elimination is achieved. After the initial 7-week lockdown that made it COVID-free, they have had to impose region-wise lockdowns twice again. So let's go across to our special guest today to talk more about what the zero COVID theory is. Yanir Bar-Yam, American scientist, professor, as I mentioned, pandemic expert is now joining us. He has lauded India for its containment strategies in the past and has devised this new model called the Zero COVID model. First up, what is the reason globally for multiple waves? Why are many countries seeing the third or fourth wave? And in India, of course, we are now gripped by a much worse second wave.
So there are two things. Number one, and most important, people have relaxed restrictions. That's the most important reason that the cases go up. If you don't hold restrictions and you will have cases, the cases will multiply and there will be more of them. The second is because there's new variants that are much stronger and tougher to fight. They transmit more rapidly, they can be more deadly, they can transmit also more and be more severe for children, and they can also evade immunity from previous infections, and perhaps also from the vaccines. There is indication that they are able to evade vaccine immunity.
Yes.
So we are faced with a disease that if we don't fight it now, it gets worse and worse. So the real challenge is to fight it sooner than later and to achieve elimination,
yes,
so that we don't continue to fight it.
But for this elimination, are vaccines the answer? Can they be the silver bullet, or the basics of COVID appropriate behavior is the only answer?
Vaccinations are not a silver bullet. Vaccinations are a tool that can help reduce transmission, but we need to use all of the tools. We are in a very tough fight. And if we don't use all of the tools that we have available to us, it is very unlikely that we will be able to triumph in this fight.
Okay. Now, you've been looking at India. You talked about India's successes in the past. So far, no link has been established with mutations in India. There is also perhaps not enough data to do so. So what do you think is the reason for a much worse wave despite early successes in India?
The main thing is that they opened schools and open businesses and reduce the strict restrictions. There is nothing else that is needed in order to explain the rapid increase. If there are variants, they make it worse. But even without the variants or specific variants, it will become very bad unless restrictions are being held. But the main thing is to use the restrictions in a strong enough way in order to achieve local areas that don't have the virus, in order to protect them and then to be able to return to normal. So the trick is not to relax restrictions when there are low cases, but to relax restrictions when there are no cases, no cases in a particular area. That allows us to return to normal pre-pandemic activity, pre-pandemic business activity. But unless we achieve a few enough cases that we can use just contact tracing to stop further transmission, then the cases will increase, and that's what we saw.
Yes.
Again, the main thing is that if we wait, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Well, the Indian government has been talking about micro-containment, local containment. But as far as keeping curbs are concerned, Yanir, it is tough to keep businesses closed. It is tough to tell people you stay indoors. COVID fatigue is setting in, and it has become a matter of lives versus livelihoods.
It is not. It will just get worse and worse until people do the things that are needed in order to stop it. It is not about lives versus livelihoods, because if we try to relax restrictions, it gets worse and worse until we decide to stop the outbreak. And as it gets worse and worse, it costs more and more in both lives and livelihood.
Okay, so you're suggesting it's better to go through this once and do it well until there are no cases, than to keep going through this. But is this what is in store for us then globally? More waves? Can we expect to have COVID in our rear view any time in 2021?
if we do the right things, if everyone says we are going to stop this outbreak, it can be over within weeks, within a couple of months. The point is that we have to take it seriously now in order to stop it. We cannot do it halfway. If we do it all the way, if we do all the right things, but the challenge indeed, as you say, is that people have to understand that if they wait, if they try to go to relax restrictions, if they do things that are not according to the need to fight the virus, then it gets worse and we still have to do the restrictions. We still have to do it, but we'll have to do it for longer. It will be
And
harder.
Yeah.
And the challenge is much greater. So the best way to do it is to do it with all intention of achieving elimination. The point is that it's not that there will be waves and waves and waves. There are waves and waves if we don't do it all the way. And
So,
that's what happened in the first wave. India, like other countries, did it part way. And then they opened up before they had achieved elimination. They didn't protect the areas that had achieved elimination. So many parts of India were
yeah.
at elimination, but they didn't protect them. And if you don't protect them, then the cases go up. It's like a fire. If you don't want the fire to grow again, you have to put it all the way out. And you have to protect the areas that have achieved elimination from having new cases come in.
Okay. So, achieve elimination with curbs and protect the areas that have achieved elimination from other areas that may still be what in India we call orange or red zones. Those zones became not that well managed, and that is perhaps writ large at why India is in the situation it is today. What is overall our understanding this year though, Yanir, from 2020 to 2021, what more do we know about the virus and its containment today?
We have all of the evidence now. The countries that have achieved elimination, and we know that includes Australia, New Zealand, and China, and Taiwan, and Vietnam, were successful because they insisted on elimination, not on part-way action. And we know that there is no trade-off between economy and health. If we allow the disease to grow, it gets worse and worse until we take action. And the action becomes harder and harder. So we've seen all over the world that every place that doesn't achieve elimination suffers the worst, both in terms of lives and livelihood.
Some countries are suggesting they're going to begin to look at COVID as some sort of a seasonal virus or like a seasonal flu. Will that be the right approach?
The amount of cases and the severity of the cases and the number of deaths and the fact that the disease gets worse is a disease that is many times worse than a seasonal flu. Anybody that claims this is a seasonal flu should get sick with it in order to experience that it's not a seasonal flu. This is a severe disease, and if people get sick over and over again, it will cause tremendous harm. And we see in Brazil, and we see in countries that have the new variants, that it gets worse and worse until we take action.
Now, herd immunity, Yanir, was the buzzword for almost all of 2020, perhaps early 2021. But now experts feel that it is impossible to achieve, either through infections or vaccinations, because the virus also continues to mutate. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is no evidence that herd immunity provides protection. All of the places that have tried to ignore the disease to allow herd immunity have failed. They have failed both for protecting lives, that's clear, but also for protecting their economies. And the situation with the new variants shows that even people who were infected will get infected again, and the cases will be severe. So there is no evidence that herd immunity can serve to protect the population in its original idea. We have vaccines that can help us protect from transmission, but even the vaccines are being undermined by new variants. We don't yet know how well they will protect us from the current set of variants, but we can be sure that there will be new variants that will almost surely undermine the vaccines. And this means that we have to take all actions, including all the tools that we have, both vaccines and social restrictions, masking, social distancing, shutting down non-essential services. Again, the trick here is not that we want to do this for a long time.
Right.
The trick is we want to do it for a short time, but in the strongest possible way. And India has demonstrated that it can suppress the outbreak. The main thing is to suppress it until you get to elimination in areas that you can protect. If 2 months ago India had protected areas and had only opened up in areas that had elimination, and in other areas had continued to suppress it until elimination, India could have been without the disease altogether. Instead, we have many more cases than we had in what's called the first wave, and we are faced with a major challenge now to get back to the state of elimination. But the longer we wait, the longer India waits, the more difficult it will be, the more harm there will be. And this is the most important thing for businesses to understand. There is no exit.
There is no exit unless you achieve elimination. That's what Yanir is saying. Finally, Yanir, I want to ask you, as an individual, people are feeling helpless. You know, vaccinated people are getting the virus. People are saying, you know, we follow COVID protocols, we still got it, or we took our mask off just once and we got the virus. At an individual level, what can a person do?
The main thing is to follow all the precautions, learn about how transmission happens, stay away from other people except for people you're living with, and avoid any going inside where other people are. Use outdoor shopping where necessary, and just exercise all the precautions. And in addition, make sure that everyone else around you, the entire community that you are part of, the friends and family that you are part of, will exercise the utmost care and precautions, and to recognize that it's not in the control of an individual, but in the hands of the community to achieve elimination. And if together we achieve elimination as communities, community by community, then people will be safe.
All right. Yanir, thanks a lot for speaking to CNN News 18. We appreciate your perspective. We hope that your message goes far and wide, especially when it comes to communities coming together to stop the spread. So the message from Yanir, at least as far as the zero COVID strategy is concerned, that if you're going to do restrictions, you do it till you have no infections left. Lifting them when you have still a few cases left means that there will be another wave. Of course, lockdowns is not something that anybody wants, but we are seeing a return of them happening. Then isn't it better to go through them once well instead of having to go through this again and again? And speaking of lockdowns, let's take a look at how Maharashtra is faring after it entered a 15-day Janta curfew. You could call it a mini lockdown. This is, of course, the last-ditch attempt by the state administration that has failed to curb rising cases to bring some respite into the situation, which is rapidly witnessing a collapse of the health facilities. Let's also go across to my colleagues who are joining us to give us a sense of what exactly is happening on the ground. Today is the first full day of the Janta curfew coming into effect. Sushmita Badane is joining us from our News 18 Lokmat team. Sushmita, आप CST पे खड़े हैं, कैसा रहा आज का दिन?
अगर हम देखें तो बीती रात से ही पूरे महाराष्ट्र में लॉकडाउन यानी सख्त ऐसे कुछ नियम जो है महाराष्ट्र के सीएम उद्धव ठाकरे इन्होंने ऐलान करने के बाद पूरी तरीके से वो नियम लागू हो चुके हैं। आज अगर हम मुंबई की बात करें तो मुंबई में आज से ही ब्रेक द चेन ये इनिशिएटिव जो है वो महाराष्ट्र में शुरू हो चुका है। मुंबई की सड़कों पर लोगों की जो भीड़ है वो कायम है। कुछ लोगों को घर पे रहने का जो सूचनाएं दी गई थी वो फॉलो की जा रही है, लेकिन दिन ब दिन अगर हम देखें तो कोरोना के जो पेशेंट्स हैं उनके नंबर इंक्रीज हो रहे थे। उसी कारण आज अभी आप शाम की अगर बात करें तो तभी भी रस्तों पे जो प्राइवेट व्हीकल्स है, टैक्सीज है, बसेस है, ये सुविधाएं जो है वो दी जा रही है। जो फ्रंट लाइन वर्कर्स है उनको सिर्फ रेलवे गाड़ियों से ट्रैवल करने के लिए जो अलाउ किया गया है। और अगर हम देखें तो मुंबई में अभी भी सख्त कार्रवाई जो होनी चाहिए, जो पुलिस है उनको किसी पे भी लाठी आप नहीं उठा सकते, किसी पे भी आप जोर जबरदस्ती नहीं कर सकते, ऐसा बताया गया है। लेकिन अगर आप मुंबई में देखें तो कल भी 6000 से ज़्यादा जो पेशेंट्स थे हमने देखे थे। ब्रेक द चेन शुरू हो चुका है, लेकिन अभी भी मुंबई के सड़कों पे लोगों का आना जाना कायम है। लोगों को घर पे रहने की सलाह दी जा रही है। एक जगह पे अगर हम देखें तो रेमडेसिविर की कमतरता है, ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रहा, बेड्स नहीं मिल रहे। ये सारी तकनीकी डिफिकल्टी होने के बाद भी अगर हम देखें तो महाराष्ट्र की जो जनता है उन्होंने अपनी जिम्मेदारी संभालते हुए, अपनी जिम्मेदारी को जानते हुए घर पे रहना बहुत ज़रूरी है। और इसीलिए आज से जो ये ब्रेक द चेन शुरू हुआ है।
जी जी, no, this is a make or break moment really for Maharashtra, especially for Mumbai. Although Delhi now has become the worst affected city, it is now much higher than the cases in Mumbai. We will of course take a look at Delhi also in just a bit. But Mihir, tell us what are the areas you surveyed today and how was the implementation? Because lockdowns in themselves will not make a difference, or curfews will not make a difference till the implementation is there.
And also the attitude of the people, which makes a great difference. We saw some amount of restraint from people stepping out. Places that are usually very crowded were less crowded. Buses were not running full capacity. Yes, of course, they have been given that cap of 50% capacity, but buses were literally empty. Public transport was not as much as what we see usually. Yes, during the Nakabandis in the morning where police was strictly checking all IDs, there were some defaulters, there were some offenders who were sent back. At this point, as the sun goes down, we are seeing more and more people trickling out.
Mihir, can you show us around? Can you just give us a sense of how many people are there really behind you at this stage?
Yeah. If I can just ask my camera person to pan, you'll see a sea of people taking a morning walk. So some of them have stepped out on the pretext of taking their morning walks. Some of them have stepped out on the pretext of buying some essential items. There are several non-essential shops that are discreetly open. What they are ensuring is there is no crowding, so that there is no attention that is focused upon them, so that they can do their business usually. And that is good in a sense, because it really helps in maintaining the norms of COVID at this point, which is absolutely essential. But as far as the curfew is concerned, it was literally silent in the morning, in the afternoon, at several locations which are generally buzzing with activity throughout the day. But yes, as the sun goes down, we are seeing some amount of heightened activity. We know that enforcement is necessary during these times, because it is important to tell people to stay indoors, stay safe, and not venture out unnecessarily. That kind of commitment we are not seeing from people at this point. Remember, today is the first day, but if they let their guards down, and if the authorities let their guard down, then really the purpose of this entire curfew will fail, and that is important at this point, and that's missing also from people at large as well as authorities at this point.
Okay. Remember, now Delhi has also gone into effectively a mini lockdown. They're not saying it because lockdown in itself has begun to have a very negative connotation. But as we were speaking to an expert too, continued restrictions is perhaps the only way to curb and to get to a point when then there is no risk of further virus spread. Until that is achieved, those restrictions, at least in those local areas, must stay. So Maharashtra is doing it at a statewide level. Delhi is now doing it, of course, as the national capital region. We'll have to wait and see if the public cooperates, because there is no other way in breaking the chain. Thanks a lot for watching.